Well, happy Sunday afternoon to you, Scott Baker.
Indeed, Mikey Ames. Time for another edition of Lead Better, live here on Sunday afternoon, October 19th, 2025. Later on podcast platforms and whatnot. Field note number 1592, and the title is Abruptly Ending a Hostile Conversation. I don't think any of us would disagree on the idea that, yeah, it's probably a good idea to abruptly end a hostile conversation. The question will be, do you think that this particular piece of advice about how to do that is the best way to do that?
I feel like these are some heavy qualifications that go into actually deploying this as a tactic, right? It feels a little bit like all else failed. This is a ripcord that you pull when you don't have any other real good option.
For sure, yes. Yeah. So we'll get right to it, because I think most of the discussion is going to be in. Let me set this up before we even state what the magic phrase would be. And we've had a number of these sort of magic words, phrases, not quite incantations. In this case, the concern is going to be things are not good in this conversation. You're going to end it in a way that is certainly passive aggressive to a degree. Well, yeah.
Right.
And so can you, just by saying, if the other person has just gone ballistic, and then you say, okay, have a great day, and then you leave, right?
Right.
Have a great day. And so that phrase is the one that's lifted up here. Now, plenty of times I've seen this happen. Plenty of times I've thought, oh, that was a good move, right? But it definitely isn't. Are you really wishing the person a great day?
No. It's passive aggressive, right?
Yeah,
it really is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for a person who is in the middle of going ballistic to recognize that someone is using a passive aggressive phrase on it might actually escalate things, right?
Very well could.
So if that escalation is something that you're calculating for, the only time you would really want to deploy this is if there are a lot of like disclaimers on the idea of like, there's no other way forward. We're like de-escalation is no longer even something that either party is trying to achieve. And therefore, we're just pulling the ripcord here.
Yeah.
And so the advice is not how to de-escalate a hostile conversation. The advice here is how to pull the ripcord on a hostile conversation.
Yeah, right? And I like that metaphor. And because the first half of the field note is about, well, when a conversation like this is going this way, you do need to end it now. Right? Now, I think that in a way, if you were to say, have a nice day, because particularly if you go, have a nice day, or have a nice day, or have a nice day. Like, I mean, there's a lot of gradations in how you would say this. Now, part of the value is you're shutting the door on what the other on this conversation. You're also not giving yourself a natural tendency to make things worse. And I think that's the other part, which is if there's a conflict going on, usually what people get hung up on is the words that you said in a moment of intense disagreement, and so like they'll remember and they'll bring it up later. Like, well, I was trying to tell you this and I warned you about that. And that's when you said that I was a nincompoop and that my analysis was faulty and I probably faked my way through college. And you went and it turned out that I was right. Whereas it can't be quite later. They'll be like, I tried to warn you and you told me to
have a
nice day, right?
Yeah.
Did I say nice day, great day? Yeah, I think the field note says have a great day, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's harder for people to hold like words against you later that in that context just seem innocuous. Like, can you believe if somebody says, yeah, I kind of lost it at work and I screamed at the boss, and you're telling your partner this and they say, and what did they say? And they said, you know what they said? Do you know what they said? They told me to have a great day. No, really? That's what they said. Yes. Oh, wow. Right. Now, okay. And I obviously one of the folks that commented on this today in Substack, kind of took not sure if this actually ends the escalation. I don't think the field note is actually saying that it ends the conflict. Right. Certainly ends for the moment, the escalation. It might increase the escalation, but it also gave you sort of your own cooling off period, right? Which could be good.
Yeah. No, if you have to pull this phrase out, it probably means there have been mistakes on both parties to get to this point, right? And so this is an admission, whether you say it out loud or not, this is an admission that you've made mistakes previously in this conversation. But at
Yes.
that point,
Well,
you want to
now,
protect yourself from having said any more, negative things that you're going to regret. And
yes.
so,
Now that could be true, but it could also, you can imagine a scenario where that's not true at all, right? I've been in many conversations where people went, ballistic, and it was not. I mean, there have been times when probably I contributed to that. I can go and you go, right, and then you go ballistic. But there are other times where it's unwarranted in any way, shape, or form. And so at that point, do you say anything, or do you just exit the conversation? Do you get up and leave the room? Do you turn off the Zoom? Do you hang up the phone? Do you just walk past the person? Whatever it is. Now, the field note itself, we should note, doesn't get into the psychology of whether this will be perceived in a particular way or not. It really is just speaking to the very practical element of, you shut the door, you ended the conversation, you kind of said, okay, great, good.
yes.
And like in fact, many of our full admired leader behavior things and things that we talk about here in field notes that are just might be advisable to say or words to use. It's sometimes like when we did the one the other day about we're doing great so far, like the key phrase being so far, which is a great thing for a leader to say. It says we're doing well, but nobody should get too comfortable because maybe there's a lot more to be done. Now, is the magic in the actual elocution of so and far? No, it's what it means, what's implied. There's other ways to say this. So whether you actually say, have a great day, or have a nice day, or good talking to you, or something like that. Like, there's other ways. But the point is, you're trying to say, I'm going to take as positive a frame of mind as I can to end this, perhaps giving you more than the benefit of the doubt than you deserve, right? About there must be some positive intention in what you're doing, but we're going to end this for now.
Right.
And then clearly, if I say something like this, it's going to catch you off guard, and you'll probably be thinking about it for a long time.
Right. No, I think the effect is to be able to allow you to escape in a way that, like the third way thinking that actually kind of throws people off a little bit is that you're not trying to end it with an insult, which is what most people would try to do in this kind of a situation. I'm going to get that last word in, dunk on you, drop the microphone, and shut the door behind me. And if you're trying to do that, you're down the wrong path. Now, that being said, you also mentioned our other behaviors that we've mentioned. Like we've got plenty of advice on how to disagree in an agreeable way. We've got plenty of advice on de-escalation. We've got plenty of advice on even mediation, right?
Yeah. We even have content on not that teams should not, let's use the word very broadly here, fight, right? Fight doesn't mean that the team is broken apart. Sometimes that the idea that like we actually foster a place where we're going to have very intense argumentation around ideas, people that are very talented that come with conviction about things. And so can we create an environment where that's going to happen, but we understand the environment that it's happening in? And, on the topic of this conversation, I'm sure you actually probably would anticipate it to a degree. I've had a couple stories we've told over the years from my own experience sort of around this behavior. But to what you're saying here right now, yes, the idea that teams could, like this idea about how to just end this conversation, this is not all that we know about tough conversations, angry conversations, things you should do. Like there's all kinds of things that we have in our catalog of behaviors and insights. But on just this one thing, it's not a bad thing just to have in the back of your mind that at certain points that you should be able to just say, all right, have a nice day.
Yes.
Maybe you just say it real quietly, right? Yes. I was on a phone call with a service provider, and we were having a disagreement. And I pointed out something sort of very concerning about the service of that particular company, and the person, the customer service person, got a little snippy about it. And I said, and I didn't say have a nice day. I said, well, I think that's it for today. And then I hung up and I went on. Now it's up to them. Like they know, like my account is worth a certain amount of dollars a year. It's not insignificant. So how they decide to proceed with that, maybe if it doesn't go well, I'll even tell you more about that story at some point.
Right,
but you see what I'm saying is, I think that very few of us actually plan out this idea that the way we end conversations, good and bad, is very important. And that then the idea of having certain boundaries actually is not necessarily a character negative. It actually says that you stand for something, like you stand for a certain way of engaging in conversation and dialogue. And when things go off that meter, I'm going to find a way to invite you back in. But if you're going to continue on that pathway, I'm not going to help with it. I'm not going to participate in it. I'm going to check myself out.
Right. Yeah. And where, the negative way that people usually get when they're at that point is they're, again, looking for that mic drop moment, right?
Yeah, right.
And so for you to let go of it, and that's like, this is all that we think about when we're in the shower repeating the argument back and forth.
Yes, right, exactly.
We're trying to come up with
I should have said, yeah,
the best lines, right? And so here you can make your shower very short from here on out, right? This is the shower line to deploy. It really is. Like, give up the ego. Stop trying to come up with something that you're going to shut the conversation down with your atomic bomb of phrases that you've got. Instead, like when it reaches the point where something is about to blow up. And I think some of this is like, I would be a little too concerned. Like, the main concern I have in deploying this is that I would bring it out too quickly.
Yes, that could be the case. Right. Now, I remember reading one time that Eisenhower had a way of doing this, where he would say, "That'll be all for now, gentlemen." Like, if things were really getting tense in a conversation or meeting. And they kind of talked about it, that, his advisors, this was a very elegant way of closing the door, right? That it just said, "I've heard enough for now," and then we're all done.
But there's something different about hearing those words from Eisenhower. And I know that we all want to be admired leaders in a way that it doesn't really matter what our station in life is. There's a power that comes from the presidential desk.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe I don't know if that was when he was just a general, right?
Oh, right.
But think about it. You're trying to close the door, but you're not trying to slam the door. Right. That's part of it. Now, I'll real quickly just tell the story that I've told a couple of times over the last couple of years, because it comes up and I think it's helpful. So when I was a television news anchor, I did not have an agent, but I had a really good contract attorney who was sort of renowned in the New York, DC circles. Mm-hmm. And so even from the time, and I had met his wife when I was working at CBS News, she was a 60 Minutes correspondent. And so even when I was working for small market stations for not much money, he would give me free advice. And he said, "Someday you might need me, and that'll be great." And so when I was sort of a major market news anchor, and I actually did need, an attorney to kind of go over a contract, I brought him in, and he did not take a percentage like agents do. You paid him hourly. And he said, "Well, I only do this in person." And they're like, "Oh, not over the phone? Like, I got to pay, like, you're going to travel to Pittsburgh and fly on an airplane. I'm paying for it, plus your hourly rate, which is enormous." Yeah. And so he was coming to meet the news director, the head person in the news department at my television station. And I said, "Well, okay, here's what's he wanted some information, but not a lot. He didn't want, like, actually I started to tell him stuff because I don't need to know that." It's like, "Okay, good." And I said, "This news director is a little bit of an irritable guy. Like, many people would just say, he's cantankerous in every way, shape, or form." And he said, "Yeah, no problem." Right. And so they had the meeting.
The reason that you're saying that is because you're amping up his ability to be cantankerous back.
Yeah. Right? Well, I'm just saying, get ready for this not to be a cordial conversation.
Right.
And so they were supposed to have breakfast. He landed, at the airport, went to the hotel. They're going to have an 8 a.m. breakfast at the hotel. And he called me at like 8:15. And I thought maybe he needed information. He was already headed back to the airport.
Yeah.
And I was like, like, my career here is I got to go to work and see this guy later today, the news director. And he said, "Well, he behaved exactly as you explained that he would." And so I just stood up and I said, I don't countenance conversations like this. And I'll be in my office in DC if you want to talk to me. And the news director later had to fly to DC and go and meet with Bob in his, office at Williams and Connolly. And that was like, that said it. Now, I didn't even know that countenance could be used in another fashion other than your face. It actually means I don't admit or it's a verb, meaning I'm not going to give permission for this conversation or whatever it is to continue. Right. And so that was a little harder than have a nice day, but it sent the same message. Like if somebody started talking, it actually gave a little more information. I don't participate in conversations like this. Now, and then he left.
In that particular story, so he demonstrated the behavior of the field note in a great way. But in your particular story, in order for it to be effective against the news director, it meant that you had to back him up. Like you may have felt for a moment, I need to get somebody else to negotiate for me, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so the fact that you trusted him, because it would actually cost you a little more, right? Because
a second conversation.
Second conversation, right? But you backed up, like you believed in the ethic of what he did so much that there was probably some kind of back and forth with you personally with the news director saying, are we going to continue to use this guy who left out of my office? Because you probably wanted to define the conversation.
And what's interesting is decades later now, I don't actually remember if I talked to the news director later that day or not, which is interesting. It's interesting that I do remember what I learned about boundaries, negotiation, professional practice, and just the way that a person carries themselves. And that if and in fact, he wasn't a blustery lawyer, right? And he worked out many big deals for many big clients. He was renowned. But it's astounding what I learned and how I remember that. So we should all remember this idea that when conversations are going crazy, you don't have to participate. And not participating sends a very powerful message, probably more powerful than any intense words that you could have used if the conversation had continued. So there you go.
There's also there's a moment, and here we are at the end of our conversation. There have been times where you and I may have just kind of struggled with the idea of how to end our 15-minute conversations. We try to keep them at 15 minutes.
Yeah, we're at 17:27. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're trying to figure out how do we end this, right? And so maybe deploying this every once in a while between you and me, even though it's not
Have a great day, Mikey.
I don't think you did that quite right. But
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.